Technologies are just tools that enable us to do things. The interesting part of the blockchain is really what it enables in terms of new forms of distributed organization. As one commentator noted, the blockchain is an institutional technology, not an information technology. There's an enormous difference between the two. Institutional revolutions are things that don't happen very often. Blockchain technology enables new forms of networked, distributed organizations, something that runs very much contrary to our existing organizational paradigm, and that's what makes it somewhat difficult for us to understand. The organizational model of the industrial age that we inherit today was one of centralization in order to achieve economies of scale through mass production, thus reducing unit cost and providing for a mass society. The technologies of the industrial age selectively favored centralization of production within closed, hierarchical organizations. Manufacturing is in centralized factories. Transport systems are centralized around transport hubs. Education within schools and universities. Entertainment centralized within mass media organizations. And governance centralized within state-run organizations, and so on. The information revolution is in the process of taking us into a new world of distributed networks as the organizational paradigm of the information age. The combination of telecommunications networks and computerized coordination enables us to replace centralized management within closed hierarchies with open networks. As the underlying technology matures, we're able to convert more and more systems that were previously closed and centralized and have them managed through automated networks, and the blockchain is just one more stage in this process. We saw this with the rise of the online platforms like eBay, Uber, or Alibaba, social networks, blogging, etc., that built massive networks of users exchanging goods and services. But these platforms were still dependent upon the centralized organization to manage the shared database, for the computing infrastructure, for the algorithms, for financial transactions, and to enable trust and authentication in the network. The decentralized web takes these platforms a step further by offering a shared, open and secure database that can be trusted by all parties, and a set of protocols for the secure exchange of value between organizations and individuals peer-to-peer. The web platforms are open networks. This means they do not just optimize within a given organization, but can enable coordination across whole industries. Indeed, this is why and how they're quickly supplanting the closed organizations. What centralized organizations enabled was trust, cooperation and coordination within organizations. But what the blockchain enables is trust, coordination and cooperation between organizations and between individuals. If we look at how our society and economy is currently organized, we'll see many closed organizations that are internally optimized. But when we look at the interorganizational space, it's extremely inefficient along many dimensions. If we look at the way businesses coordinate along a supply chain, or the way nation-states interoperate in the global political system, we will see there is huge redundancy and friction caused by discontinuities. A classical example of this is the border system between nation-states and the bureaucratic procedures for obtaining a visa for moving from one nation to another, which creates a massive amount of friction at the interorganizational space. And it's because those organizations don't have an effective interorganizational infrastructure for collaboration and coordination. This greatly reduces the overall effectiveness of these systems and the delivered outcome for the end user. When we look internal to these organizations, they look like efficient, well-oiled machines. But when we look between them, the whole space is very inefficient. The whole space is very ineffective at delivering overall outcomes. And this is part of the significance of the blockchain, because it provides a shared, trusted database between organizations. It has the potential to switch the dynamics within economy and society from competition between closed centralized organizations to collaboration between organizations, and greatly strengthen working capacities across organizational boundaries, The results of this would be much more efficient overall societal and economic outcomes. Indeed, we can note that achieving coordination across organizations could result in quantum leaps in delivering outcomes and our capacity to tackle major global challenges of today, such as environmental degradation, where weak existing inter-organizational institutional infrastructure has gained little traction. In this respect, the blockchain has the potential to give us not just incremental improvements, but an order of magnitude greater capacities within society through collaboration within whole ecosystems. It is precisely this coordination across organizations, industries, nations and people that is required to provide the resources needed to tackle some of today's most complex challenges, and it's precisely this that is significantly absent within existing institutional structures. Because of the centralizing forces prevalent within the industrial age, we live in societies that are operated by many different closed organizations, many different companies all producing cars and competing for market share, many different governments that all focus on the interests of their citizens over those of others, many different healthcare providers, transport providers, etc. The result of this is, though, a huge amount of inefficiency and redundancy when taken as a whole, many different companies all recreating the wheel within their own organizations and expending huge amounts of time and energy on trying to get ahead of their peers. We assume that this is the normal state of operations, that it's just human nature in some way. But in fact, it's really just a function of the institutional structures we have built over the past centuries. As game theory will tell us, people respond to the incentives and the socio-economic forces acting on them. In the absence of cooperative structures, competition is often the optimal strategy for individuals and organizations. But once there is the institutional structures to enable trust and coordination between members, cooperation can become a much more viable strategy for the agents involved. Because the blockchain enables this shared and trusted database that doesn't belong to any single organization, it makes it greatly more possible and viable for organizations to collaborate on a single solution or single source and achieve much better results for each organization and the economy as a whole. As an example of this cooperation across different closed organizations, we could think about the design and construction of a building. There may be many different companies involved in this process, all creating their own designs and diagrams for the building, with each having to continuously contact each other to access, exchange and cross-reference all this information. Given a single shared database, they could, though, all collaborate on a single design of the building, making for a greatly more efficient overall process, while at the same time each organization would benefit, and thus the overall results are more efficient. Likewise, the same is true for identity. We currently have many different copies of our identity spread across many different organizations, governments, social networks, employees, etc. But each of these only has a partial understanding of us. Currently, we're recreating the wheel for each organization, while data and reputation does not move well between them. Instead, a single identity could be created on the blockchain that belongs to the individual, with each organization then contributing to this data as they work together to create a more complete record of identity and reputation. In so doing, we've moved from all those frictions between these closed organizations to collaboration and synergies between them, creating something that is greater than any of the parts they had before. The same for a supply chain. Instead of each participant holding their own documents and records during each stage in the supply chain, a single record for the item could be created on the blockchain, with each organization then contributing their information to it, to create a single source of truth that is accessible to all as needed, while at the same time being more secure than having separate records in each centralized database. The end result of this new institutional technology is a much greater capacity for inter-organizational collaboration and powerful ecosystems that are greater than the sum of their parts. Given that all our current systems of organization that are centralized could be decentralized in this fashion using blockchain technology, we can see how it really could enable a reorganization of society and economy. Organizations within society rarely operate in isolation. They function as parts of ecosystems, and the value for society is not created by any one, but instead by the flow of value across the ecosystem. It's not Apple that delivers our iPhones, it's a massive global supply chain of hundreds of different organizations collaborating. Whereas our previous institutional structures optimize for individual organizations, the blockchain optimizes for the value within the whole ecosystem, and thus potentially much greater value for society as a whole. The information revolution is changing the world from disconnected to connected. The genie of hyperconnectivity is out of the bottle, and connectivity along virtually all dimensions is proliferating daily. As a consequence, our systems of organization will change from being based around fixed structures and boundaries to being coordinated via connections. Instead of the control of components through fixed hierarchical structures, organization will emerge out of the interaction and the exchange of value along those interactions. Enabling that will require a massive build-out of secure, frictionless information networks, this global cloud computer of the blockchain. To understand better how this shared database that enables inter-organizational collaboration works, we'll talk about distributed ledger technology. As we've been talking about, the blockchain is like another layer to the internet that enables secure, trusted records and transactions between people who may not otherwise trust each other. The trust is in the technology, computer code and mathematics, rather than people and centralized institutions. In this respect, people sometimes talk about the blockchain as a trust machine in its capacity to enable a network where trust is created by design. It's built into the system automatically. Because the blockchain creates a trusted database, it can function as a record of value storage and exchange. These records of value and transactions may be called ledgers. Since ancient times, ledgers have formed the backbone to our economies, to record contracts and payments for the buying and selling of goods or the exchange of assets like property. These ledgers started out as records in stone, clay tablets and papyrus, and later paper as they evolved into the ledger books supporting modern accounting. These ledgers enabled the formation of currencies, trade, lending, and the evolution of banking. Over the last couple of decades, though, these records have moved into the digital realm, as whole rooms of people working to maintain accounts have been replaced by digital computers, which have made possible the complex global economic system we live in. Today, this record-keeping system is once again being revolutionized, as these ledgers are shifting to a global network of computers, which is cryptographically secured, fast and decentralized, what we call distributed ledger or distributed ledger technology, DLT for short. A distributed ledger can be described as a ledger of any transactions or records supported by a decentralized network from across different locations and people, eliminating the need of a centralized authority. All the information on the ledger is securely and accurately stored using cryptography and can be accessed using keys and cryptographic signatures. Any changes or additions made to the ledger are reflected and copied to all participants in a matter of seconds or minutes. The participants at each node of the network can access the recordings shared across the network and can own an identical copy of it. At the same time, these networks make constantly available for examination a full audit trail of information history, which can be traced back to the moment when a piece of information was created, and every participant in the network can get simultaneous access to a common view of the information. These ledgers can be used for the recording, tracking, monitoring, and transacting of all forms of assets. All asset registries, inventories, and exchanges, including every area of economics, finance and currencies, physical assets such as cars and houses, and intangible assets such as votes, ideas, health data, reputation, etc. In this case, the blockchain can serve as a public record repository for whole societies, including the registration of all documents, events, identity, and assets. In this system, all property could become smart property. This is the notion of encoding every asset to the blockchain with a unique identifier such that the asset can be tracked, controlled, and exchanged on the blockchain. For example, distributed ledgers could be used to replace or supplement all existing intellectual property management systems, as they can register the exact content of any digital asset, such as a file, image, health record, or code, to the ledger and give it a unique identifier in the form of the hash values that we discussed earlier. There are two main classes of distributed ledger: public ledgers and permission ledgers. The former type is maintained by public nodes and is accessible to anyone. Bitcoin is a well-known example of a public blockchain where anyone can read the chain, anyone can make legitimate changes, and anyone can write a new block into the chain. Ripple is an example of a permission blockchain, where the creators of the network determine who may act as transaction validators on that network. Distributed ledger platforms in each category have their own unique features. Some are designed for specific types of application, and others for more general use. DLT technology can have a powerful disintermediation effect, as data can be put directly onto the shared database by the nodes in the network. There is no longer need for a centralized organization to provide this service.
A CryptoSystems database is shared by everyone and cannot be modified without the entire network knowing. Trust in such cryptosystem makes cooperation between companies, countries, people and institutions possible. In this way it is possible to coordinate the work between strangers, giving better overall results for the community than when each one works on their own. When a community adopts a cryptosystem as a registry of value, it can reward those who benefit the community and can restrict harmful behaviors. This represents a stimulus for those who add real value to their products and services and for everyone to behave according to the rules of the community. And this results in communities with greater harmony and wealth.